The 2024 NFL Draft has concluded, and in today's video, or podcast if you're listening through Apple or Spotify, we are going to be grading every team's NFL Draft directly after the draft concluded. We are going to start with the Chicago Bears, and we are going to go by division. So, look, with the Bears, here's the deal. They only had 5 picks, but when 2 of your 5 picks are in the top 9, especially when they're Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze as 2 of the 5, there were a lot of tweets out there that said basically along the lines of like, look, it doesn't matter what they do with their other 3, and to be honest, I completely agree with that train of thought. Now, heading into the draft, Chicago actually only had 4 picks, as they had 1, 9, 75, and 122. Those were the only picks that Chicago actually had, and then they traded a pick next year to come back up and get Austin Booker, and even without factoring in the Caleb or Rome part, I absolutely love the trade up for Austin Booker, as I think he has a lot of potential. And the thing is, I was hoping they would address pass rush. I thought they could have got Braylon Trice at pick 75, and I thought he would have been a good Robin to Montez Sweat's Batman. But Kieran Amagaji is a development tackle, and there's a chance he eventually starts. So for Chicago, we're getting 2 good starters at minimum, plus a punter, which I'm not going to ding the Bears when they have a franchise quarterback and franchise receiver for taking a punter, and by the way, a damn good punter at that in the 4th round. And then they took a developmental pass rusher. I personally gave the Bears an A+. That is due in large part, of course, to a quarterback who will hopefully be the first 4,000-yard passer in Bears franchise history, who fans already love, and Rome Odunze. And we always talk about the situation for teams and for quarterbacks, and Caleb's walking into a situation with not only a top 10 pick at receiver in Rome, but he also has DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift in the backfield, Darnell Wright. Hopefully Kieran Amagaji works out, but this is a franchise-changing draft, and I hope the Bears thoroughly enjoyed this weekend. Bears fans, that is. This to me was an A+. Now, we are heading to the host city of the 2024 draft, and we are heading to Detroit. So, first off, absolutely love the Terrion Arnold selection. Not only did they address a need by drafting Terrion Arnold, they traded directly in front of the Packers to get Terrion. And I thought that was awesome that they did that to begin with, but you also have to factor in that the Lions did that last year with Brian Branch too. So we're talking about 2 starters on the Lions defense that could be Packers, because the Packers needed both positions and are now Lions. So I know the Branch doesn't have anything to do with this draft, but I absolutely love that move last year. Now, Ennis Rakestraw Jr. at pick 61. Guys, there were times I mocked Rakestraw to the Lions at 29, so for them to get him at pick 61 to me was another home run for Brad Holmes. Now, I thought this draft class, especially with the first 2 picks, I mean, you're walking out with 2 starters from day one. Are Terrion and Ennis Rakestraw going to have some welcome to the NFL moments? Yes, absolutely. But I still think there's a chance that they walked away with 2 secondary starters with their first 2 picks in the first 2 rounds of the draft. So I absolutely love that for them. Now, I ding the grade a little bit for Detroit because Giovanni Manu, I was not the biggest fan of. I thought they could have got him later, and not only that, but I thought they kind of got fleeced for this trade. I mean, I liked the trade up for Terrion Arnold. I didn't really care that they gave up their 3rd round pick from the Vikings trade with TJ Hawkinson to get Terrion Arnold, because you were also taking him away from a division rival in the process. But to give up a 3rd round pick next year was not something I can get behind, at least at the moment. Now, there of course is a chance that Giovanni can prove me wrong and can prove everyone wrong that dings this draft because of that trade. And the same thing applies to Sion Vaki. That was the Lions also traded a 2025 4th round pick, so they traded their 3rd and 4th round pick next year from this trade. So I kind of ding the Lions a little bit for that. Mekhi Wingo, we saw several defensive linemen go off the board in this class, and some were a little earlier than others, which we'll get to. But I thought Mekhi Wingo, for where he was good value. Now, there's one defensive lineman in particular with the AFC South that I thought was significantly overdrafted, but we'll get to that. But one of my favorite value picks all day was Christian Mahogany in the 6th round at pick 210. Christian Mahogany was, to me, a top 100 player. To get him not only past 100, but past 200 was tremendous value for the Lions. Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, another great draft. They didn't have many holes on this roster. The only thing you can really say is maybe they should have went edge, but I mean, look, this team went to the NFC Championship game last year, and they improved their roster. And right before the draft started, they extended Amon-Ra St. Brown and Penei Sewell. Ultimately, we went with an A grade for the Detroit Lions. Next up, the Green Bay Packers. So, the Packers' first-round pick, Jordan Morgan. A lot of people liked killing the Jordan Morgan pick. I didn't kill it. I like Jordan Morgan as a player a lot. I want to say he was around player 30 or 31 on my board, so I didn't think that, it was a player in the mid-40s at pick 25 and that they significantly reached. I want to say I had Barton around 21, 22, and Morgan 30, so yes, I would have preferred Graham Barton over Jordan Morgan, but I don't think it's that detrimental when both are going to be good football players for a long time. And at that point, it was definitely a preference for Green Bay. Now, Edgerrin Cooper was a pick that I liked a lot for them. Edge pairing next to Quay Walker for the Packers linebacking core next year is going to be fun. And the Packers defense, I know they're going to get a lot of attention for Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur, of course, hailing from the whole Shanahan-McVay tree. That's naturally going to get a lot of attention from the media. But guys, with Edge Cooper, with Javon Bullard, and everybody else they have on the roster, I really liked what the Packers did in this draft. And by the way, also speaking on the offensive side of the ball, I did like Marshawn Lloyd as a pickup for them in the third round. Now, having a duo with Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd is pretty solid. So I do like that for Green Bay. The only pick that I would kind of question was, I wasn't the biggest fan of Tyron Hopper at 91, especially over, I know this is a completely different position, but I thought the Packers could have addressed receiver with Troy Franklin being there. I thought Franklin was, to me, a top 50 player, and he was falling, and you already took Edgerrin Cooper in the top 50. That's just kind of nitpicking, but one pick that I did like for the Packers was Michael Pratt in the 7th round. Obviously, Packers fans are hoping that Michael Pratt never plays, and that's not a statement regarding Michael Pratt's ability. That would obviously be hoping that Jordan Love never gets hurt. And if in the scenario Michael Pratt plays, they're hoping that it's in a Week 18 game with their playoff position solidified. But Michael Pratt was a pretty solid backup quarterback prospect, and to get him in the 7th round, I thought that was great value. Ultimately, we gave the Packers an A-. Now, to the Minnesota Vikings, who, of course, they had a pretty busy day one. They, of course, got J.J. McCarthy, and then they also traded up for Dallas Turner. Now, there's probably, I'm guessing everyone at this point saw or at least all Vikings fans at least saw the clip of head coach Kevin O'Connell reacting to GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah informing him that they were going to get Dallas Turner. Now, in terms of the trade value for the Vikings to move up to pick 10, from 11 to 10, did they give up too much? In theory, yes. And in theory, they did as well, to move up to 17 with Dallas Turner. But if J.J. McCarthy and Dallas Turner pan out, are you going to remember those picks 3 years from now? I think it's a little different when you're trading up for players that aren't a quarterback or edge if you get fleeced. And we'll get to a couple trade-ups in the early part of the 2nd round that I was not the biggest fan of, especially for what teams gave up to move up. But if you're moving up for specifically two of the two most important positions of football, maybe aside from offensive tackle, you're going to pay a little bit more of a premium as it is, especially when they're on the board. The Jets could have just dangled it and said, look, Denver is on the phone right now, Minnesota. We have this set in place if you don't accept this. So it is what it is. Ultimately, we gave the Vikings a B+. I wasn't too moved by what they did on day 3. I like Kyrie Jackson. I like the idea of Kyrie Jackson, and I hope for defensive coordinator Brian Flores' case that Kyrie can play press on the outside. And of course Flores is known for his variety of blitz packages. I actually tweeted this, but maybe there's a package where Kyrie Jackson, or not package rather, but Kyrie's on the outside pressing a receiver. Dallas runs free for a sack. That's obviously a best case scenario, but I wasn't too moved by what the Vikings did on day 3. Hopefully these guys stay on the roster. I'm always down for a good developmental piece, or even having offensive line depth in Walter Roos and Michael Juergens, but hopefully Will Reichard is the Vikings kicker of the future. And the reality is, if you spend a 6th round pick on a kicker and it works out, nobody's going to care. So overall, I give the Vikings a B+. The trade value for them wasn't the best, but like I said, if JJ and Dallas pan out, those are the 2 players from this class. And by the way, I did like the fact that each player is 20, 21 years old, and you have them for 5 years in their rookie contracts. Both players are going to get better by the year, and when they have that second contract, I mean, they sign a 3 or 4 year deal, we could be talking about 3rd contracts if each player works out. That's a big if, but ultimately we gave the Vikings a B+. Now, heading over to the NFC East, and of course the Washington Commanders started with Jaden Daniels, but their draft class is a lot more than just Jaden Daniels. Now, we'll get into the Jaden pick, but I really loved what the Commanders did on day 2. They originally had pick 36 and 40, and they traded back with the division rival Eagles and got 2 second-round picks out of it to move back 10 spots. So I thought, in terms of a value standpoint from the trade, I loved that for Washington. But Jaden specifically, look, I like him as a prospect. He enters a situation where he will be throwing to Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, and now tight end Ben Sinnott. And they also addressed the receiver position to the 3rd round by bringing in Luke McCaffrey. I would have preferred offensive line to be addressed with the capital they had a little earlier. I do like Brandon Coleman, but I would also be lying if I thought Brandon Coleman was going to come in and be a premier offensive lineman from day 1. Fortunately for the Commanders, Jaden obviously has a ton of upside in terms of what he can do with the football in his hands. Obviously, you're going to hear a lot throughout the summer, throughout Jaden's rookie year. He will need to protect himself at the NFL level, but like the review on the screen says, the team is a new owner, coach, and now quarterback. They can grow together. I don't necessarily agree with the last part. He will be the best quarterback in this class. But look, Washington has a new face of the franchise. And as much as everyone's going to, talk about Jaden Daniels and talk about the 6 quarterbacks and the 12 picks, my favorite picks from this class for Washington was Johnny Newton and Mike Sanderstill. Those were 2 of my favorite players in this class. And I think Washington will walk out of this draft with 4 starters. I love Sanderstill's game. To me, he is just a prototype modern day nickel corner. He's going to be a problem for opposing receivers in this division for probably the duration of his rookie contract, hopefully a year or 2 after that. He is 24 years old, but I like Sanderstill a lot. Now, with Johnny Newton, this was a case of we're just going to take a good football player. And the Commanders had the number 2 pick for a reason. They did not accidentally fall into the number 2 pick. So I like that for Washington, that they saw Johnny Newton, recognized the talent he had, and basically said, look, we have Daron Payne, we have Jonathan Allen, but why don't we just run a 3-down lineman and just draft Johnny Newton, because he is that good of a football player. I love that, and I love the idea of them running a 3-4 concept, 3-4 defense, and potentially having Jamin Davis kind of just shoot the gaps. And Jamin Davis, to me, has not been a read and react linebacker. He was a athletic specimen coming out of Kentucky. So I think all of this, if you have a 3-down lineman with Johnny Newton, Daron Payne playing the 0 tech, and then Jonathan Allen, of course, as the other defensive end within the 3-4 set, and have Jamin Davis as one of the linebackers inside, I like where the Commanders' defense is headed, and I am eager to see how Dan Quinn gets this defense rolling in 2024. Overall, we gave the Commanders an A, and I think they had a couple good developmental pieces on day 3, including Jordan McGee, a linebacker from Temple. So I thought it was overall a good draft for Washington. And like I said, when you walk out with 4 starters from one class, because I do think Ben Sinnott will eventually replace Zach Ertz, he might even do that in his rookie year, you're not going to complain about this class, man. 4 starters is a big step in the right direction for Washington to be able to close the gap between where they are and where Dallas and Philadelphia is relative to when these teams play. Also, Washington always gives Philly a run for their money, but the Dallas, it's a little shaky when they play. Now, For the New York Giants, I think they walked out with at least 4 starters as well. Malik Neighbors, to me, was one of the blue chip talents in this class. They lost Xavier McKinney in free agency. Now, Tyler Nubin is not going to play the exact same role as Xavier. There's just physical limitations there with Nubin, but he is a very high IQ football player. To be honest, I thought Nubin would have declared last year and been in the 23 draft, but look, now the Giants are walking out with Malik Neighbors, Tyler Nubin, Andrew Phillips. He's going to play nickel, of course, and Theo Johnson, to me, was a guy who, the numbers, when you see them in terms of his 40, his vertical, all of the workout numbers, that's not who he is as a football player. I think he was a big workout warrior, and I was glad that nobody drafted Theo in the top 50 or 60 picks. Having said the workout warrior part, that does not mean he can't play football, and that doesn't mean that he's an Olympic athlete on the football field. Theo can, there's a reason he's an NFL player now. I like the potential of him. I don't necessarily think he's going to, have a big rookie year by any means, but I like the potential of him moving forward. And I think all Giants fans watching this know that Daniel Jones is not going to be the long-term answer, but I love the Malik Neighbors, Theo Johnson, wide receiver, tight end pairing, especially in the future. And I also thought they got really good value with Tyrone Tracy in the 5th round as well. But the Giants' future, I think, in 2025 will be looking really good, and that's going to be due in large part to this class. I think at minimum they walked out with 4 starters, maybe even 5, depending on if Theo and Tyrone eventually become starters. But I think at minimum one of the 2 will, and I think the Giants walked out with 4. Now, the Dallas Cowboys are up. This one, I have a couple complaints with. And the first one is, it's trading out of Graham Barton when he was there, and this is because I hold Graham Barton in a high regard. I think Graham Barton is a phenomenal, I think he was a great prospect. I didn't like trading out of him. I know they got pick 73, and you can say in theory that you'd rather have Tyler Guyton and Cooper Beebe than Terrion Arnold, which is who the Lions ended up taking, but here's my whole thought process and why I'm not the biggest fan of the Tyler Guyton pick specifically. Tyler played right tackle at TCU in Oklahoma. There were reps specifically, not just on 1 or 2 snaps for Tyler, but there were multiple times throughout the year where he looked a bit raw. And when you are transitioning from college to the NFL, it's a big jump for anybody, not just a raw prospect like Tyler, but now we're talking about a player that has multiple years of starting experience, asking him to switch positions in the NFL, and he's going to have to play the best of the best in year 1, and by the way, you have to protect for Dak Prescott in a contract year, and good luck, Tyler Guyton, we're sticking you out on an island, buddy. I feel like the Cowboys took a lot of risk with Tyler Guyton, and they didn't necessarily need to because Graham Barton was there. And they're obviously not going to move Terrence Steele to the left side and say, okay, like Terrence, you're going to sit in the left side so we can have this rookie come in and play right tackle here. That's not how it's going to work out. I hope it works out. It could work out, and I will say positively that Dallas does a really good job of drafting and developing linemen. I love the Tyler Smith selection they had a couple years ago. I've been a big Tyler Smith fan for a couple of years. But I worry about Tyler Guyton. I am hoping for the best, but I worry about Tyler Guyton. Now, Marshawn Nealon, to me, I feel like you were either in or out on Marshawn Nealon. Unfortunately, I was out. I will say, again, positively for Nealon, that he is a good run defender, and he will enter a situation that is favorable for him to succeed. He will be, hopefully, the successor to DeMarcus Lawrence, and not only that, but obviously, in a pass rushing situation, Nealon will be a direct beneficiary of having Micah Parsons on the same team, because Nealon's never going to have a double team, or at least it's not going to be more than a little chip from a running back out on a route, because that's obviously going to be where the offensive line's attention is obviously going to be focusing on Micah and even DeMarcus Lawrence in his rookie year. So I will say positively that Nealon can develop, and I think he can be a sufficient Robin to Micah's Batman. I wasn't a huge Marshawn Nealon guy. Now, one pick that I loved, actually 2 picks that I loved. I loved Cooper Beebe in the third round. Thought it was great value for the Cowboys at 73. To me, Cooper was a top 60 player. I think he can definitely start from day one. I like Cooper a lot, and Cooper is, to me, one of the definitions of just a just plug and play. He is a good football player. He's probably not going to be, an all-pro in the NFL level, but look, there's only 10 players that are all pros every year in the trenches, or maybe 15 or 20 if you factor in like the first and second team, and then if there's 2 at each position. Anyway, you get the point. Cooper might not be an all-pro, but he's going to be an average to above average player. I like him a lot, especially when you can get a starter in the third round. I thought it was a good job by the Cowboys front office there. Now, I did like Kalen Carson in the 5th round at 174. I had Kalen at spot 100 on my big board. So if you look at the spot differential there, it was a plus 74 in the Cowboys' favor. Thought it was great value for them. Obviously, we know the Cowboys have Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland, so he's not going to start, at least initially, but no NFL team is ever going to say, we are good at corner. And if you can get that type of value in the 5th round at corner, it's a good job by Dallas with that pick. But overall, I gave this a B, just because the first 2 picks I have some questions with. Now, heading to the city of brotherly love, we are, of course, discussing the Philadelphia Eagles. Guys, every year, Howie Roseman sits back and he puts on a masterclass in the NFL draft. Jesse Pinkman, how does he keep getting away with this? Every year. It's always something. He walked out with my top 2 corners, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. Sure, he had to give up 50 and 53, and I think there was like a 6th round pick or 5th round pick in there to come up to get Cooper, but 4 years from now, is anyone going to care that they had to give that up? No. Quinyon and Cooper are 2 good corners. I mean, Cooper's probably going to be more of a big nickel safety hybrid. He also brings some return dynamic to the game. I love this draft for the Eagles. And they also brought in Jeremiah Trotter in the 5th round. I had Trotter in my top 100, so that was a big plus positive point differential for the Eagles on the board as well. I think Trotter is going to be a really solid role player for them. The thing is with Trotter is, don't have the expectations that for him that his dad set, but he is a 5th round pick for a reason. I thought Trotter personally was a top 100 player. I think he has a considerably high floor. He is a very, very smart player, and you see this a lot with sons of former players, that they have a very high IQ and they do a lot of things right. They don't have bad habits. They don't get out of position on whatever concept teams are running. They don't get out of, they read their keys, especially at the linebacker position. They read their keys right. They read and react. And Jeremiah Trotter is a perfect junior. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is a perfect example of that. I also liked Will Shipley as a 4th round backup, especially to Saquon. Jalix Hunt, I know some Eagles fans were a little upset about that, but this is just a pass rush development pick in round 3 that has a ton of upside, and he's going to be at minimum the 3rd option behind Bryce Huff and, of course, last year's 1st round pick Nolan Smith. So I like this pick a lot. Johnny Wilson was a pick that I didn't really see a lot of people talking about, but Johnny Wilson is north of 6'6". He's 235 pounds. I would be surprised if they moved him to tight end, because I think he has receiver skill set, receiver movement ability. Again, just a great pick, developmental pick in the 6th round. The Philadelphia Eagles, not surprisingly, walk out of this draft with an A+. Out to the NFC West to discuss the Arizona Cardinals, and this was one of my favorite drafts. Not necessarily in terms of value, because I thought there were some picks that were a little less valuable than where the pick indicated, and I thought it was a little position, a little rankings were not great, but I thought the process that Arizona went in with was phenomenal, and you can clearly see what Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ossenfort are trying to build in the long run. They, of course, started it off with a can't-miss prospect in Marvin Harrison Jr., and you're going to hear a lot of hype around Marvin Harrison Jr. this summer, heading into the fall, rightfully so, by the way, but I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that if Marvin stays healthy for all 17 games this year, if he doesn't have an 1,100-yard season, I think that would be a disappointment for him in his rookie year. Again, he has to stay healthy for all 17 games. You can't say that, clip this, and then he only plays 4 games. So if he stays healthy for all 17 games, 1,100 yards for him is very, very doable. But Darius Robinson at 27, I was not the biggest fan of. I personally had Darius. Now, I was a little lower on him, granted. I saw a lot of people had him in the 50s and 60s for, where they had him on their boards. I had Darius right at 70. I think Darius, in the right situation, can have success in the league. First round, pick 27, not the biggest fan, personally, but what I will say is they didn't take him in the first round without a plan. So I trust Jonathan Gannon in terms of what he's doing with this team, in terms of how he's going to use Darius, and he can play 3-tech, he can play 5-tech. I like the potential of Darius. I wasn't the biggest fan of the player going number 27 overall, but Max Melton at 43. I like Melton going to Arizona. I think this is just a good football player filling a need on a team that finished with the 4th overall pick, that only won a couple of games last year. So I like this pick. Trey Benson, running back, FSU. This pick, along with Tip Ryman. Now, we'll get to Tip in a second, but I love this pairing, and I guess you can add Isaiah Adams in there as well. But I love the Trey Benson pick because the Cardinals at the end of last year, specifically within the Philly game, because that's probably going to be the most memorable game for fans, for people that may not remember how the Cardinals season ended. The Cardinals ran for over 200 yards in that game against Philly. They ran the ball a lot down the stretch. Now, this 3-pick span here of Trey Benson, Isaiah Adams, and specifically Tip Ryman is a statement. Specifically, Tip Ryman, 82 overall, is a statement. A lot of people had Tip Ryman between 200 and 230 in terms of their overall big board. But what I will say about Tip, the first line right here says it from the scouting report. Best blocking tight end in the class. Now, Tip Ryman, let's just go ahead and call it what it is. If Trey McBride goes down, you're not going to want to put him in fantasy. You're not going to want to say, Tip Ryman's up, he was a 3rd-round pick, he's going to have 7 catches today because Trey McBride's out. That's not what you're going to want to do. Tip Ryman is 270 pounds and has that 6th lineman run blocking ability. Trey Benson and James Conner behind Tip Ryman, behind Paris Johnson Jr., is a very much, we are going to kick your ass and take names later mentality. And I love that for the Cardinals. Not just because that's, how I personally would build a football team, because if you can run the ball, and really piss a team off, there's nothing more infuriating than knowing a team is running and you can't stop it. But they did this by adding one of the best receiving prospects in the past 15 years on top of it. So the Cardinals' offense is quietly going to be one of the better units next year. I mean, they're going to be a complete pain in the rear end to play because they can beat you in any way. You want to run the ball 40 times today? Fine, cool, let's do it. You want to stack the box, have 7 or 8 in the box, and leave Marv one-on-one, leave Michael Wilson one-on-one, and hope that a 200-pound safety can cover Trey McBride? Fine, we can have Kyler do that too. And Kyler can also run the ball at a great level. The Cardinals were one of my favorite drafts. Now, again, did they overdraft in some scenarios? Absolutely, yes. But I did like Dadrian Taylor Demerson on day 3 as well. I also like Christian Jones. Now, to me, I'm going to be honest here, if you switched Christian Jones and Isaiah Adams' draft spot, I would prefer that. I thought Isaiah Adams was significantly overdrafted, but I thought the Cardinals more than made up for it with Christian Jones. Now, Xavier Thomas in the 5th round, solid role player. Pair him with B.J. Ojulari of 2 young edges. I like what they have cooking there. Specifically, he'll be a 3rd down specialist, but the Cardinals were one of my favorite drafts. Ultimately, we gave them an A, and I really, really like what the Arizona Cardinals have working for them in the future. Seattle Seahawks are on the clock, and not on the clock, but they're up, rather. This team, to me... Now, I do want to say this. I didn't say this at the beginning, which is on me. But we are grading the picks. We are not grading... Because Seattle, as you can see, did not have a 2nd-round pick. We are not factoring in Leonard Williams' production in 2024 and saying, you know what, they have Leonard Williams as their 2nd-round pick, so this goes down because he's a 30-year-old defensive lineman, and we didn't like that trade. That is my personal opinion. I did not like the trade, but you get the point. This is grading the picks, and even when the Panthers come up, we're not going to say that because they traded the pick, this is an automatic F. Just for reference. I should have said it at the beginning, but I did want to get that clear now. But with the Seahawks here, look, guys, if you've watched the channel for a little while, you know how frustrated I've been with the Seahawks in terms of their run defense. And like we said with the Cardinals, they are going to try to run the ball down your throat. And pretty much every team that has played the Seahawks over the past few years has, in fact, ran the ball down their throat. I mean, guys, in 2022, the Sam Darnold-led Panthers, I want to say, went out to Seattle and put up, I want to say, 30 points in the road. And I want to say they ran for 200, I think it was 20 yards in the process. I mean, if that doesn't piss you off as a Seahawks fan, I don't know what does. And Mike McDonald obviously had a lot of success in Baltimore last year. Yes, due in some part to Roquan Smith and Kyle Hamilton. Actually, you could change that to due in large part. But Byron Murphy is the start of getting stronger in the trenches and not being a pushover team like they have been for the past 2 years. So I love that pick for them. And the same concept applies to Christian Haynes as well up front. On the offensive side of the ball, because for as much as I love Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet as a duo, we didn't really see them last year be a good duo. We didn't really see them, have games where one has 17 carries, one has 18 carries. One finishes with 110 yards, one finishes with 92 yards, and Gino only has 17 passing attempts all day because they were effective running the football. That's what Mike McDonald's going to want to, bring more of as the head coach of the team. We're going to get stronger up front, and I thought the Seahawks did a tremendous job of that. And what we said with Tip Ryman also applies to AJ Barner. Not as much, because I do think Tip is a better run blocker than AJ Barner, but look, you have to get stronger up front, and I thought the Seahawks did that. I also like DJ James as a late day 3 pick. I was not the biggest DJ James fan in the process, just because, you can see the weight right here, 164. That is obviously very light, but there were times where I saw DJ James, in top 60 or 70 of people's big boards, and I was not the biggest fan of that. I thought DJ would be a day 3 pick due in large part to the weight, but if you can get him at 192, I think that's good value by Seattle. Overall, we gave this draft an A-. Now, we are down to the Bay Area for the San Francisco 49ers. This is going to take a little bit to explain, but Ricky Pearsall, I was not the biggest fan of Ricky Pearsall. He's going to be 24 as a rookie. Not only that, but if you were going to draft Ricky Pearsall in the first round, I guess my biggest thing would be, why would you not trade Brandon Ayuk during the draft? Why would you not trade Debo during the draft? One or the other. Why would you draft Ricky when there were better players, not only better players at the position, but also better players overall on the board that could certainly help, like Cooper DeJean for that matter? I didn't like Ricky Pearsall over Xavier Legette, Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey specifically, but I will say for the 49ers, I liked every pick pretty much after this. I specifically loved the Malik Mustafa pick for them. I think Malik has a chance to be one of the bigger steals from day 3. And I love that pick for them. Renardo Green, great pick. Great pick for the 49ers. He's going to be a player that you're probably going to see in the divisional round of the playoffs this year make a big play in the fourth quarter. I like the 49ers draft really outside of the Ricky Pearsall pick. Ultimately, we went with a B+. Now, for the Los Angeles Rams, I like their draft overall. There was one thing in particular I did not like, but we'll go with the positives first, and then we'll get to that. Jared Verse, great player. He's going to be a pain to play in the run. You have a good run defender. You have a very heavy-handed pass rusher. I thought the Rams pass rush, even if Aaron Donald was playing this year, I thought they needed another guy, specifically at edge, which they addressed in the first round. Love that. Love that they got Jared Verse. Now we have Jared Verse, Byron Young, Michael Hoyt, and of course Kobe Turner, and now Braden Fisk in the second round. So I like what the Rams are doing in terms of trying to replace Aaron Donald. Obviously, you're not going to replace him with one player. There's nobody that's ever going to play for the Rams again that can single-handedly replace him. Donald's a one of one, but I like this, committee approach that the Rams are going with. Specifically, what I did not like, what the Rams did, was trade up from, 52 to 39, give up capital this year, and give up a second-round pick next year. That was the problem that I had with the Braden Fisk trade-up. So I did ding them a little bit for that in their draft grade. However, I liked everything else after that. Blake Corum, they're I mean, there's probably going to be the Kyren Williams replacement at some point. Running backs' lives are short in today's NFL, and I know Kyren just had his first breakout year in his second season, but he's 2 years away from a payday, and Blake Corum is a very, very talented running back. His play style is very similar to Kyren Williams, and obviously we saw the success that Kyren had last year, so why not double down and have Kyren Williams 2.0? Love that pick. Cam Kitchens, I thought, was a very, very good pick on day 2. Cam Kitchens led the ACC in interceptions in each of the past 2 years. Now, you might have some interception luck one year. You might have a Deron Bland 9 interception year one year. But you don't accidentally lead the ACC of all conferences in back-to-back years. I like Cam Kitchens a lot. He is a scheme-specific player because that 40 is slow. But I thought at 99 overall, I thought it was a very good pick by the Rams. Now, one pick that I specifically liked, actually two, I did like KT Leviston in the 250s. I thought KT was a top 180 player. To get him at 254 was obviously great value. But I also liked Bo Limmer a lot. Bo was a player that I was all over in the pre-draft process. I mean, when you can add interior offensive line depth, you will hear me say this a couple times in today's video, but when you can add interior offensive line depth on day 3 and potentially have him start down the road, that's a huge win every time. The only real ding for me, like I said, was the trading the second round pick next year, and ultimately we went with an A- for the Rams. To the NFC South for the Carolina Panthers, and like we mentioned during the NFC West portion, we're not going to say, well, you know, they had the number 1 pick, this is an automatic F. This is strictly on draft picks because that's a lot of background to go back and do all that. Now, for Carolina, this offseason, not just this draft, but this offseason was about how the hell do we fix 2023 in Bryce Young's rookie season and not completely ruin him like we attempted to in 2023. How do we do that? Well, let's get Xavier Legette as a start. Now, I like Xavier Legette to the Panthers a lot. I think Legette he had to go to a specific team for him to really succeed. Legette to me was not a 4.3, 8.40 guy on tape. Now, there's a couple plays, if you look up Xavier Legette South Carolina highlights, there's one in particular where he kind of outran everybody, kind of went down the right sideline, and then I'm going to say he kind of like cut it back to the left a little bit. He kind of went back to the left a little bit, and you saw that 4.38 speed. Now, in terms of get off, in terms of the first second and a half of the actual play, you know, with how corners play him and when they're up in his face, I don't think Xavier is as smooth of a, you know, get off me type receiver. I don't think he's as smooth off the line as you would like, and I don't think his actual game speed is 4.38 unless you get him on one of those, you know, plays where he can take it to the house. But I like Legette to the Panthers for a few reasons. He enters a situation with Deontay Johnson and with Adam Thielen there to learn from every day in practice. I mean, Johnson and Thielen are great route runners. Now, Thielen's obviously not the player he was 5 or 6 years ago, but look, do you think Adam and Deontay are going to say to Xavier, like, hey man, you know, we just finished with the number 1 pick. We're not going to teach you anything. Well, Adam did because Deontay was a Steeler last year, but my point is Xavier early on, I think, is going to be a project player. And that's fine because you can get him on drags, you can get him on touch passes, you can get him on screens. Xavier to me is a 6'3", 230-pound gadget player early on. I like this pick for Carolina because you have Thielen who can win by route running. Thielen actually went for 100 catches and 1,000 yards last year. You have Deontay Johnson who can also win as a separator. And there's little things that even Deontay does within his routes. Like, Deontay never stops coming back to the football. You know, it's not just a curl and I'm just going to wait for the ball. You will see at times where Deontay just keeps coming back to the football. And those are little things within the route that those guys will be able to teach Legette. And obviously Xavier has physical ability that not a lot of people, not just in the NFL, but on the planet have. So I like this pick for Carolina a lot. It also addressed a need to help out Bryce Young. The same thing applies to Jonathan Brooks. Now, obviously, Jonathan, when he was backing up Bijan in 2022, did not get a lot of touches. And obviously, Roshan, for that matter, as well, who was a Chicago Bear. Jonathan, unfortunately, tore his ACL, but, you know, we're talking about a second-round pick here that, to me, even if he misses 3, 4, 5 games, does it matter? I mean, if you get 4 years out of him, and if he plays 64 of the 68 games over 4 years, are you really going to care about the first 4 games he misses while rehabbing an ACL? Now, I will say this about Jonathan Brooks' knee injury. I'm obviously not a doctor. I don't claim to be one. But we're talking about a torn ACL. We're not talking about a torn patella or, a completely fractured kneecap or just something that is not, like, as common as an ACL is. So because of that, I don't worry about that with Brooks. The only real, at least in terms of his recovery, the only real knack I had in this class was Trevin Wallace. I wasn't the biggest Trevin Wallace fan in the process, in the pre-draft process. I thought they overdrafted him by 30, 40 spots at least. I get that they wanted to get a linebacker, especially with the departures they had in free agency. I just wasn't the biggest fan of Trevin, and that was really the only knack that I had in this class. Jatavian Sanders at pick 101, I loved it. I thought Jatavian was a top 55 player in this class. So if you can address a need, getting a day one starter in the 4th round, love it. I thought that was a good pick for Carolina. Charles Smith-Wade, good 5th round corner, good guy that's probably going to play. He'll play quite a bit in his rookie year, at least for where they are. I mean, he's going to play meaningful snaps. And I thought Chow was a top 150 players where I ended up having him on my big board. So you get him at 157. That's positive value for the Panthers. Overall, I really liked what they did aside from Trevin Wallace. Ultimately, we gave them an A-. Now, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, guys, I got to be honest, I like what the Bucs did a lot in this class. The Bucs went to the divisional round of the playoffs last year. They nearly beat the Lions in the divisional round. They play in the NFC South, which is not the most threatening division. They got Graham Barton with their 1st round pick. I didn't think there was going to be any way, whether it was the Dolphins, whether it was the Cowboys, even the Packers for that matter, that Graham Barton was going to slip through the cracks and make it to them. That was a home run by itself. Chris Braswell, I've said at times that I wasn't the biggest Chris Braswell fan. I thought that he had to go to a specific spot, and I like the landing spot for Chris Braswell. Now, we'll get to another pass rusher for the Falcons in the NFC South in a minute, but had Braswell gone to Atlanta, and they basically said, hey, Chris, figure everything out on the fly, I wouldn't have liked that landing spot, but I like it in Tampa, especially with defensive-minded coach Todd Bowles, who I think is kind of an underrated head coach, to be completely honest, or kind of underrated defensive mind, rather. Tyke Smith, love him. I thought he comped similar. I mean, this is a light version, of course, but similar to Antoine Winfield. I mean, he was a 89th overall pick for a reason. If he were that close to Winfield, he would have been a 1st round pick. But I like the Tyke Smith pick. Also love the Jalen McMillan pick. For McMillan to be able to learn behind Chris Godwin is, I mean, it's awesome. The Bucs are, by the way, this, I will say this, unfortunately for the Bucs, not related to the draft, but related to their roster. The McMillan pick, to me, signifies that this will probably be Chris Godwin's last year in Tampa. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but probably brace yourself for that whenever Godwin's contract is up, which, as far as I know, is at the end of this year. McMillan will step in, but I like the pick there. Even Elijah Klein, Bucky Irving, again, Bucky Irving and Rashad White. I love that running back duo. Elijah Klein, Devin Culp, depth pieces. And I like Devin Culp in the 7th round, by the way. Is he going to be a 700 or 800 yard tight end? No, but he's a project in the 7th round that's fun to, move around as a chess piece. Is he going to make the roster? I don't know. I hope so, but I like him at 246th overall. Overall, we ultimately gave the Bucs an A. I think they're going to walk out with at least 3 starters, maybe even more. And that's on a team that went to the playoffs last year. So I like what Tampa Bay did. Now, the New Orleans Saints, they had limited draft capital due to several trades, but with the picks they made, I thought they had meaningful picks. Talisi Fuaga, I did not think was going to last to 14. I mocked him to the Raiders several times at pick 13, and he is a nasty offensive lineman, and that's the type of that's what the Saints need. I mean, they finished 31st in yards per carry last year. The great Alvin Kamara averaged less than 4 yards a carry last year. Now, I thought Jamal Williams was most definitely a product of the offensive line in Detroit, and I didn't think he was going to go down there and rush for 17 touchdowns and have a 1,000-yard year like he did in 22, but his numbers were very ugly in 23 with the Saints for a reason. I love the Fuaga selection for them. Fuaga is just a, like we said, kick rear end, take names later player. Love that. Kool-Aid at 41. Kool-Aid was a top 30 player for me. He is a good CB2 at the NFL level, period. Now, there were times in the draft process where people wanted to make Kool-Aid more than what he was. They wanted to make him a, top 15 pick and a future star. But there's plenty of roles. There's plenty of roles for guys like Kool-Aid in the NFL. CB2s, there's no coach that's going to say, hey, Kool-Aid, we just don't want you because you're not good enough. I thought the Saints' first 2 picks were 2 starters for them. Spencer Rattler, I even like the potential there. Look, I've said multiple times before that I'm not a Derek Carr fan, and I know Saints fans feel the same way. At least a lot of them do. If you're going to take a backup quarterback in the 5th round in a 17-game season when we saw countless quarterbacks go down last year. Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, just to name 3 off the top of my head. Deshaun Watson eventually. There's 4. That's 12% of the league right there, and there's more that I'm not even thinking of at the moment. You get the point. If you can take a guy that to me was a top 100 prospect at 150 that has matured over the past few years, by the way, that I think has gotten better as a player, both on and off the field, solid hit. I'm not going to say grand slam at pick 150, but I like it a lot for the Saints. And by the way, I will go ahead and say one player that I thought was a home run for them was Christian Boyd. I thought for the limited draft capital the Saints had, I gave them an A-. I thought they had a really, really solid draft. Now, one other thing that I do want to say regarding draft grades that I also did not say is you can't look at every single draft and grade the same. There's a reason that, you can't say like, if Xavier Worthy isn't the receiver equivalent that Caleb Williams is, despite them being 27 picks apart, then the Chiefs draft stinks. You can't grade. You have to grade like within what they did. Now, next up is the Atlanta Falcons. And the reason I brought that up is because, we're going to have a draft grade similar for like a team like the Browns who didn't pick till 55 or 54 or whatever it was in the 2nd round. So you can't like compare and say, well, how is this similar? You have to grade relative to where they are. At least that's how I am grading. Now, the Falcons are up. I didn't hate the Penix pick as much as I hated what it represents for the Kirk Cousins signing. To me, what the Penix pick means. Now, look, the reality is Michael Penix could be starting for them 3 years from now. He could be still starting for them 10 years from now. I know he's a 24-year-old prospect. But the reason why I was not a fan of this pick was every time Kirk Cousins throws an interception, every time he throws an incomplete pass, every time he misses Drake London by 6 inches, the camera's probably gonna pan to Michael Penix on the bench. The crowd's gonna get frustrated with Kirk, and I just don't see a scenario where this works out the way the Falcons intend to. That's not Michael Penix's fault. That this pick frustrated me because you're going to have in practice, by the way, Michael Penix has an absolute howitzer of an arm. He has a cannon of an arm. And you're going to have in practice Michael Penix throwing 65-yard bombs to whether it's Darnell Mooney, whether it's Drake London, whoever. You step back, play action, 3-step drop. I'm going to air it out from the end zone to the opposing 35-yard line with Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles injury. And Kirk's going to start opening day. And everyone's going to see, what frustrates me about this is you're going to see all of the teammates, everybody, the coaches, everybody, see Michael Penix physically be able to do things with his arm that Kirk Cousins cannot. Now, obviously, arm strength does not determine how good you are in the NFL because Joe Milton would have been a first-round pick. But I just don't see a scenario where this works out. Now, the Falcons had more draft picks than just Michael Penix. And I'm going to do a video on the Falcons soon discussing the whole situation. But that pick frustrated me because of the Kirk Cousins signing. Now, Ruka, I was frustrated with this pick too because of the trade up. They originally had pick 79. They traded, I want to say 43 and 79. They might have even traded a day 3 pick. I'm not sure on the day 3 part, but I know they at least traded 43 and 79 to move up to 35 to get Ruka. I like Rook as a prospect. I don't like Rook over Johnny Newton. And I think Rook can have success at the NFL level, but I just thought it was poor value because I didn't think Rook was going to go before pick 43. Now, if the Falcons are that sure that he's going to be a high-level starter, make a Pro Bowl or two, then sure, it's worth it. But I thought this was a classic case of being able to just stay where you are and take your guy. And I specifically didn't like it because it was over Johnny Newton, who I thought was a top 10 player in the class. Braylon Trice, by the way, love this pick. I did like this pick a lot. I thought this was great value at this point. Braylon Trice is, I mean, there's high motor players, and there's Braylon Trice. Like, he is as high of a motor player as you're ever going to find. I like that pick. And I also like the Brandon Dorless pick a lot, too. Jason McClellan, to me, was just a dart throw. I mean, you're talking about pick 186. Hopefully it works out. But Rook was frustrating. The Penix pick wasn't even frustrating because I think he's a good prospect, and I think in Atlanta specifically behind that offensive line and with Bijan and Tyler Algier as running backs, and of course Drake and Kyle Pitts to throw the football to, I think he will work out. It's frustrating because of free agency and what that represents. Ultimately, we gave the Falcons a B-. To the AFC now for the Baltimore Ravens, and their draft started with Nate Wiggins at corner. Now, Eric DeCosta and the Ravens war room reminds me, they're basically the AFC version of Howie Roseman and the Eagles. They sit back, let the draft go to them, draft good players, and there's a reason they are, more often than not, contending in January and playing in contending, meaningful, big football games. Nate Wiggins is a perfect example of this. There's, of course, concerns with Nate's size, with his injuries. I mean, even after Nate ran the 40 in Indy, which was a 4.28, by the way, he had to pull up for a hamstring injury. Now, I will say this. Obviously, I don't sit here with any sort of knowledge or intel on Nate's injury history more than what's public, nor does anyone watching this, unless you work for the Ravens. But my point is, Baltimore's not taking him unless they're absolutely comfortable with that. Nate, talent-wise, is a top 20 player in this class. I also like Roger Rosengarten as well, a big athletic tackle that could start from day one. He could be very easily fill in at right tackle, especially with the trade from Morgan Moses that sent him to the Jets. Adisa Isaac, he's definitely raw. He's a good athlete, but he's definitely raw. But even on day 3, I really liked what the Ravens did, specifically with Tez Walker at pick 113 and TJ Tampa at pick 130. Now, TJ Tampa was a top 50 or 60 player on most people's boards, and the Ravens just, again, sit there, let the draft come to him, and take him at 130. They, every year, I mean, we'll have the same conversation next year. They don't panic. They let the board, they take it as they go, and they, more often than not, hits doubles. I mean, they don't strike out a lot. Yes, you can look up several picks in their draft history and see strikeouts here and there. If you want one, an example would probably be, I guess, Hayden Hurst back in 2018. But you know who else they got in that draft? Lamar Jackson. But look, the Ravens, all around, really solid class. The only one that I really have questions with is pick 93, just because he's a project, and that's Adisa Isaac. I like Rasheen Ali. They had to replace both J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. But overall, we gave the Ravens an A. I liked what they did a lot. Now, we are going to Pittsburgh here, and I really, really like what the Steelers did in this draft class, man. I cannot say enough how much I like this class. Troy Fautanu in the first round was as much of a steal as you can have at pick 20. Zach Frazier was, to me, he was a top 35 player in this class. You get him at 51. Roman Wilson was, to me, like a top 70, 75 player in this class. You get him at 84. Peyton Wilson, depending where you had him, of course, you know, the injury history is going to be, you know, it's going to pull him down, plus the fact that he's a 24-year-old linebacker. But if you have a player that has, you know, top 50 tape and you get him at 98, does that matter? I don't think it does. You know, we're not talking about a guy that just started playing football 2 years ago that's, you know, 6'7", 280, that's just an athletic freak. We're talking about a really, really good football player that has injury concerns. And then to top it off, they get Mason McCormick, who I thought was a really, really good prospect as well at the start of day 3. I mean, whether Russell Wilson plays beyond this year, none of us know. But they're setting their next quarterback up for success as well. And again, that could be Justin Fields or whoever. They're also setting both Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren up for success too. And I wouldn't sit here and act like I'm that excited about most third-round receivers, but given the Steelers' receiver history, you can name any of them over the past 15 years. It's hard not to at least buy in a little bit with that, with Roman Wilson, and think that he might not, or think that he can't be a 1,000-yard receiver in the future, because he absolutely can. The Steelers killed it. All around great draft. A+ grade. Now, Cleveland Browns are up. And like we said, we're not factoring in, the Deshaun Watson trade and any other trades, because they don't have a 4th-round pick. We're not doing any of that. We're simply grading the picks. Now, what they did, day 2, pick 54. I was a big Michael Hall fan in the pre-draft process. I loved him a lot. I thought he was a very situational usage player. And I thought Michael would ultimately go to an AFC team. I didn't know where. I thought a good landing spot for him would have been Cincinnati, which we'll of course get to next, as they're the final AFC North team. But look, you're on a team now with Za'Darius Smith and Myles Garrett, or I should have said Myles Garrett first, but Myles Garrett and Za'Darius Smith as outside pass rushers. And, Cleveland went to the playoffs last year, and they have every intention of going back this year. And Michael Hall is a really solid 3-tech pass rusher. And, whether they're playing CJ Stroud or in the playoffs again, or Joe Burrow or Lamar or whoever, you need to be able to rush from the interior, and Michael Hall can do exactly that. And that's a big reason why I like this pick so much at pick 54. I think there's a lot of potential there. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Michael Hall finishes top 10 in pressures for all rookies this year, and he's not going to have anywhere close to the snap count level that other rookie pass rushers are. I like that pick a lot. Zach Zinter, despite the low grade here, I like it. I mean, you have to get interior offensive line depth. The Browns were, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I want to say down to their 3rd or 4th tackle by the time they got to that playoff game. I mean, they were down to scraps on their roster. And we're now, with the 17-game schedule, there's been rumors that it's going to go to 18, but specifically with the 17-game schedule, you have to have depth on the offensive line. So I will never kill a team for taking a top 100 player, or top 100 pick that is a good football player, and drafting him, hoping to develop, and if he's a stash and he's a spot start guy, I'm never going to kill a team for that in today's NFL. I mean, you need as much offensive line help as you can. And I even like Jamari Thrash in the 5th round as well. I thought that was tremendous value for the Browns. This was, to me, the best receiver class ever, just from, with all the talent there is. And I thought the Browns had a really, really good value with Jamari Thrash there. Even Miles Harden from South Dakota. I mean, he was a sleeper in this class. Overall, I really, really liked what the Browns did. And for what they did, we ultimately give it an A- because, like we said, we're not factoring in that Deshaun. We're bringing it down to a D or anything like that. Ultimately, an A- grade for Cleveland. Now, out to Cincinnati. Or, sorry, as I like to say, we're on to Cincinnati. We obviously all know what that reference is. But, look, there were talks that the Bengals were going to try and trade up, or at least this was like the media driven. Like, they're going to try and trade up to get Brock Bowers, to have Brock Bowers on a rookie contract for 5 years. And as much as we all would have loved that for the time period that it would have happened, I wanted them to eat their vegetables before their dessert. And I'm glad they did with Amarius Mims. I think Amarius Mims has absolute home run potential as a 1st-round pick. I love the pick. I mean, there's definitely going to be concerns with the pick because he only had 8 starts. But look, he's going to be behind Trent Brown, and he's going to be able to learn from Trent Brown. And I really, really like the potential for Amarius Mims to learn behind Trent Brown, especially in year 1. And for that matter, Trent will also get to learn behind Orlando Brown Jr. as well. I mean, there's offensive tackles in the NFL, but not every offensive tackle is as big as those 3 guys are. I mean, you might have a guy that's only 6'4", 315, or 6'5", 320, but they're not 6'7", 6'8", 340, 350, and there's just ways that they have to, counter inside moves or set their feet because they are so heavy compared to an average tackle. So all around, great situation for Amarius to develop, and I like this pick a lot. Now, Chris Jenkins, to me, a high floor player. I like Chris Jenkins a lot. Great landing spot, especially with Sam Hubbard there. Hopefully Trey Hendrickson stays. I think Chris Jenkins is a steady Eddie at the defensive line. Now, Jermaine Burton could be one of the bigger steals from this class. He, of course, is a wild card. If he pans out, he'll be a great pick for Cincy, but I even like three of their day three picks specifically, and they were Eric All. He has potential to be one of the best receiving tight ends from this class, like that at pick 115. Thought there's a lot of value there. Josh Newton, good depth corner. He was a player entering the year that had a lot of hype, fell off as the season went on, but look, he's a good depth corner. We'll take it at 149. Now, Eric All and Tanner McLaughlin in one tight end class is a great job by the Bengals. We saw the Ravens a couple years ago take multiple tight ends in the fourth round with Charlie Kohler and Isaiah Likely, and it worked out for them with Isaiah Likely. So hopefully one of these guys pan out. Like it for the Bengals. And I also liked Matt Lee, an interior offensive lineman. I think he will actually be in the NFL for like 6 or 7 years. I think he'll bounce around and play for a long time. And I think that he will stick around on a roster, and I think he'll be that spot start offensive lineman that teams are desperately going to covet moving forward. So all around, we gave the Bengals an A, but I think there is legitimate A+ potential. Now, to the AFC South, pretty short trip from Cincy to Indy, but we are discussing the Colts and their class. Now, I like a lot of players that they walked away with. Latu, Mitchell, Gonzalez, Bordolini, Anthony Gold. Really moving forward, the only thing that I would nitpick from this class that I was really surprised they didn't go after, and that was a corner early. Now, they did eventually take Micah Abraham on day 3, but you could argue they could have went Quinion at pick 15, and you could argue they could have went Cooper DeJean, but look, I'm going to focus on the positives here. A.D. Mitchell at pick 52. I know there were a lot of concerns regarding AD's work ethic, and there was a lot of concern with diabetes because apparently this is not me, this is just the rumors, that apparently if you have diabetes, you don't recover as fast as other players. Again, not my word, that's kind of why he fell. Chris Ballard, the general manager of the Colts, made sure to specifically defend AD's work ethic, and he used an F word, and he said, "I'm sorry for using a cuss word, but I'm also really not sorry," because Chris Ballard evidently knows how hard AD works. AD, to me, was the 5th best wide receiver in this class. I cannot say enough how much I love the thought of Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, Adonai Mitchell, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, behind this offensive line and with Shane Steichen as the head coach and seeing what they can do in a full 17 games next year. As much as I like Latu, I am more excited about A.D. Mitchell in this offense than I am Latu on that defense. Now, I do like Latu a lot, and I think Latu enters a good situation. He's a technician as a pass rusher. You're not going to see Latu win by forklifting an offensive lineman and just straight up speed to power. You're not going to see that often. But Latu has a variety of pass rush moves, and he is a very good football player. I think he has a pretty high floor, too. I think he'll be at least a 6-sack player as a rookie, which Indy needs, especially in that conference. And the thing is, with both Latu and DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart and even Kwity Paye, if you don't have enough time to throw the football, it's not going to matter. And Samson Ebukam, by the way, in pass rush, it's not going to matter. Now, I would have liked for Indy to address quarter, but overall, I really liked what they did. I mean, I even liked their developmental picks, Matt Gonzalez, Tanner Bordolini to me, and again, another good interior offensive lineman. They know how to develop them in Indy. So I like what Indy did a lot. I thought it was a really solid draft class. Ultimately, we gave them an A-. Now, for the Jags, this is one that we're going to start high and go low from there, and then we're going to come back up slightly. But we're going to start really high of highs. Brian Thomas Jr. was one of my dream fits to go to the Jags. You know, every pre-draft process, when you're mocking guys, you want guys to go to certain places, or at least not want them, but you think of how much they could maximize their success there. Brian Thomas Jr. in Jacksonville was one of those guys. Now, you can see Trevor Lawrence, air it out, and you can see Trevor hopefully become the player that he was touted as a couple years ago, and Brian will play a big part within that. And by the way, that also doesn't factor in how much Jacksonville acquired to trade back and still get Brian Thomas. That move specifically was a slam dunk A+, if you want. Love that for the Jags. But After that, I was frustrated. Mason Smith to me was he was a borderline top 150 player. They took him at 48. The highly touted recruit part just never living up to the hype in college just brings me back to the Cardinals taking Robert Nkemdiche in the first round back in 2016 after Robert was the number one recruit in the 2013 class in high school. Now, this is going to sound sad to me, but there's probably going to be a lot of people that don't remember Robert Nkemdiche just because I'm guessing some people are younger and probably don't remember the 2016 draft, which that again makes me feel old. But look, I didn't like that pick at all. I would give that, for as much as I love the Brian Thomas Jr. A++. This was an F. I thought they whiffed in the second round. Jerry Jones, he misses a lot of tackles, and I mean a lot of tackles. Hopefully he's he's good in coverage and stays good in coverage, but I worry once the ball actually gets in the receiver's hands at the NFL level, because missing tackles in college 99.99% of the time does not automatically just poof and flip a switch and translate in the NFL. Javon Foster, good developmental offensive line, or a development offensive line. I hope it works out. But if you're having to sell it, by the way, I know I said countless times that I won't criticize an offensive line pick in today's league, but if you have to try and sell yourself on a developmental offensive line after whiffing on the previous two picks, not necessarily on the Jarian pick, but especially on the Mason pick, that's down. That's just not great. I would have liked them to address corner a little earlier than DeAndre Prince in the 5th round. I do like DeAndre Prince in terms of what style of player he is. DeAndre is, he's going to show up in the run game and he's going to be that, do the dirty work, and I like that, but Killian Robinson, I was not a fan of that pick at all. Again, I thought there were better backs on the board. I would have preferred Dylan Labe from New Hampshire. I just wasn't the biggest fan. Hopefully Cam Little works out. I'm not going to judge a kicker too much because nobody knows. Like, you could have one kicker miss. You could have a kicker miss one big kick and then they're done forever. You could have them be the next Justin Tucker. Nobody knows. I don't really. But if you do find your kicker of the future, great, awesome job. But one player that I did like a lot, and especially going to Jacksonville, was Miles Cole. Miles Cole is, for a 7th round pick, he's going to be a guy that's going to be fun to, hopefully they develop him. Hopefully, he's going to be fun to watch if he makes the roster. I liked that pick a lot. That's where I kind of said we start high with Brian Thomas, then we go down, and then we're back up. Not obviously back up here, but we're come back up a little bit. I like the Miles Cole pick a lot. But my biggest, I guess, takeaway for Jacksonville was, what was the plan after Brian Thomas Jr.? And ultimately we went with a B- grade. Now the Tennessee Titans are up, and for the Titans, let's go ahead and pull their draft class up. They of course started with J.C. Latham and T'Vondre Sweat. So the thing with Latham is I like Latham as a prospect. I do. I personally had Olu Fashanu higher than J.C., but we'll see where the Titans go with this. And I think especially with Bill Callahan as the offensive line coach, there were some lows on tape with Latham, but I think he'll be able to get Latham to play at a high level in the NFL. Now, one of the biggest things with coaching is, especially with prospects, is once you see a player, play at X level or Y level or wherever, and, assuming that's a high, how can we get that player to play at that level, every single play? How can we get that player to play at his best all the time? And I think Bill Callahan can get the most out of JC for that. T'Vondre Sweat, like the player, but I was shocked he went in the top, not just 60, but top 40. And the second round of the draft to me is always interesting because of, you're going to see teams just value guys all over the place. Now, there's probably teams that took T'Vondre completely off their board, but obviously the Titans aren't calling around asking, hey, Denver, did you guys take T'Vondre off your board? Hey, Seattle, is T'Vondre off your board? I mean, it just doesn't work like that. But I was surprised to see him go at pick 38 despite the pre-draft concerns, not just the DUI or DWI, but just the work ethic concerns and everything that was out there. But I think he can become a good player. I love Cedric Ray. I thought Cedric was one of the more underrated prospects in this class. I think Cedric can develop into a really, really good linebacker for Tennessee. I also like Jarvis Brownlee Jr., the cornerback from Louisville, and James Williams will be a linebacker in the NFL. So I like James Williams in the 7th round at 242, and I love Jalen Harrell from Michigan at 252. Overall, the thing is I like the Titans class the more it went on. Sweat is mainly the one where I'm a little out on. Ultimately, we gave Tennessee an A-, but I thought they probably could have traded back and still got Sweat, although I will say at least to kind of justify the Sweat pick, at least where it was there was a defensive tackle run going, and they, I guess, wanted to make sure they got their guy. Now, for Houston, you're either in or you're out of Kamari Lassiter. You are either in or you are out. There are several people that will sit here and tell you that Kamari he's a beast on tape, and he has good tape for the most part. There's also the opposite, where people will say that Kamari's limitations will really show at the NFL level. And I am on the latter part. I was not a Kamari Lassiter fan in the pre-draft process. Like I've said before, I don't like coming out and just making videos of players that are going to stink in the NFL. That's not what I want to do on the channel. But I will say positively about Kamari that he went to a great landing spot. And I hope that D'Amico and the Texans have a plan for him. And I believe they do. But I'm just not a Kamari Lassiter guy. The 40 really, really concerns me. It was a 4.6, and I know you don't want to put everything in a 40, but we're talking about a 180-pound small corner that is slow on top of it. We're not talking about a 6'4", 215-pound corner that ran a 4.57. We're talking about a 180-pound corner that ran a sub 4.6. I really worry. This is my concerns with the Kamari pick specifically. They have Derek Stingley, who they took 3rd overall and had a bad rookie year because he was in a terrible scheme that didn't fit him at all in 22. He broke out in a big way in 23. Teams are not going to throw at Stingley anywhere close to the level they did in 23 this year. Why? Because they're going to try the 2nd round slow rookie in Kamari Lassiter. And I wish the best for Kamari. And I think that D'Amico is a good coach, and I think he has a plan for him. But I worry about that. Now, Blake Fisher, to me, is a development tackle. Now, if you want to be the straight pessimist point of view, which I'm not going to be, but if you want to, because I'll speak my thoughts here at the end, you can just say, look, they took a slow corner and they took a development tackle with their first 2 picks, and they took a guy that can't tackle with their 3rd pick, in Kalen Bullock, or that is a poor tackler. But I like the Blake Fisher pick because I think he can legitimately start at some point. My best case scenario career path for Blake would be a Brian O'Neill type career path, where Brian was a 2nd round development pick for the Vikings back in 2018, and he's worked his way into a Pro Bowl tackle, and he signed, I want to say, a $110 million contract with the Vikings. Hopefully that's in Blake's future. I like Blake, though. I like the Blake pick more than I like the Lassiter pick, or the Kalen Bullock pick for that matter, too. Now, Kalen, as you can imagine, it's 6'3", 190. You can imagine that, and especially a guy that has a lot of interceptions like Kalen has, you can imagine that, people are going to project the best for him right away. But this isn't Madden where, you can just essentially put all your attributes into like being a better tackler. I mean, Kalen's tackling ability concerns me. And like we mentioned earlier, if you are not a good tackler in college, what part of going to a bigger, faster, stronger, and quicker league makes you think that he's going to all of a sudden become a good tackler? I worry about that for Kalen Bullock. Now, I will say positively again, I like Cade Stover, the tight end from Ohio State. To me, he's going to be a guy that can catch anywhere from 20, 30, 40 passes a year. Just a guy that's going to be a steady Eddie. I think he is just an average tight end in the NFL. And people take average the wrong way, like that's a bad thing. But you need, a good second tight end. And I think Cade Stover can be exactly that. And I think he'll know his role from day one. I didn't care for a lot of these picks down the stretch. Solomon Byrd, I thought he was intriguing, especially, you can plug him, or, opposite side of Will Anderson in pass rush situations. But that's a 7th round pick we're talking about. Ladarius Henderson, again, we're talking about a 7th round pick. I like the potential there, but I came away with a lot of questions from the Texans class. Now, I hope the best for Kamari. I like the landing spot, but ultimately we gave this a C+. All right, out to Denver to discuss the Broncos class. They took the 6th quarterback in the first round of Bo Nix. Now, I will say, I'm a Bo Nix guy. I like Bo Nix a lot. I think he can have success in the NFL. Now, admittedly, in that day and a half span from the end of the first round until the start of day 3, I was a little worried about the supporting cast that Bo Nix has around him. Now, I will say this because, and Broncos fans, this is not for you, so if you want to skip 10 seconds ahead, or 15 seconds if you're Apple, Spotify, go ahead. I don't think that Sean Payton was playing some 4D chess, that he baited the Vikings into taking J.J. McCarthy, because that makes no sense for a couple of reasons. Why would you want a team in your conference to get more draft capital? That makes no sense. I just wanted to address that. I'm sure Vikings fans wanted me to address that. Anyway, we're gonna keep going here. I like Bo Nix a lot as a prospect. I really do. You can argue the Broncos overdrafted him, but look, 3 years from now, if he's their franchise quarterback, do you think anyone's going to say, you know what, man, that 24 Broncos class stinks? Because you know why? They could have traded back with the Eagles, who had picked 22, and they could have got a second-round pick, and they still could have had Bo Nix at 22. No one's going to care, man. I mean, sure, you might have that conversation now and maybe even a week from now, and, you know, if Bo Nix throws an interception in week 1, maybe you say that. But no, I'm fine with the Bo Nix pick. And to be honest, I like it. I don't agree with the C- grade. Jonah Ellis, great bloodlines. Like that pick a lot for Denver. You need to get after the quarterback in this conference. And to be honest, the Broncos had a lot of players. They drafted a lot of players that I not just liked, but loved in the pre-draft process. Loved Bo Nix, loved Troy Franklin, loved Chris Abrams-Draine and Audric Estime. And especially with Audric Estime and Troy Franklin. I mean, Estime running behind Javonte Williams for a year, who's entering the final year of his deal. I like what the Broncos did to start to build around their young quarterback. And Troy Franklin was a steal at pick 102. I thought he was a top 45 player in this class, and to get him at 102 was a steal. Obviously, him already having the built-in chemistry with Bo Nix helps a lot. I really like what Denver did despite the limited capital, and again, we're grading this off of what they had, so we're not going to say because they traded a second-round pick for Sean Payton, this is going to be bumped down to whatever. For what the Broncos did with the picks they had, we gave it an A. Now, to Kansas City to discuss the Chiefs. I said countless times during day 1 of the stream that I was not a Xavier Worthy fan, and that I didn't think that Xavier Worthy should have been a first-round pick. And unfortunately, whenever you place Xavier Worthy in the hands of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, things change. If Xavier Worthy went to a bad situation, we'd be having a conversation. But this was a dream scenario for Xavier Worthy. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if Xavier goes for 800 yards, 1,000 yards, and you see him have 7 touchdowns of 20-plus yards as a rookie. It wouldn't surprise me at all. But he wasn't their only pick. Kingsley Suamataia is an interesting prospect. I'm eager to see how the Chiefs go about developing him. I was kind of out on Suamataia. I mean, you know, he's always going to be a development prospect, but I kind of like Blake Fisher, you know, at least for where they were drafted. But I'm eager to see where the Chiefs go. Jared Wiley, I mean, people are going to automatically assume because they took a tight end that he's, you know, going to be the Kelsey replacement. I don't think that. If he can be a good tight end too as a 4th-round pick, that'll be worth it. Jaden Hicks, I thought, was tremendous value at 133. I thought Hunter Norzat and Kamal Hadden were each tremendous value picks. And overall, I really liked what the Chiefs did in this draft. The only, I mean, again, the Suamataia and the Wiley pick are going to be ones that are probably going to be knocked, but even the Wiley pick, you can just say, well, look who's throwing to him. But overall, I gave the Chiefs an A-, and Xavier Worthy could, if he breaks out like people are going to project, I mean, you're going to have wild stories and just comments and tweets about Xavier Worthy for at least the duration of his rookie year because of where he landed. It's going to be, the grade can go up, but I gave it an A-. Now to Las Vegas, I liked what they did. All around, top to bottom, with the exception of one pick, which we'll get to. But Brock Bowers, the only, I guess, complaint I would have is already having Michael Mayer on the roster. But the reason that I'm not going to, ding the Bowers pick is because that was an old regime. This Michael Mayer, whenever we say regimes in the draft process, there's there's a reason that's brought up, because the new regime does not care what the old regime did. Now, it might be different if they just drafted a quarterback, last year in the first round, but just because they took Michael Mayer in the top 40 last year and Brock Bowers was available, that didn't matter. That didn't matter to Las Vegas. I think Bowers is going to be close to a 1,000-yard tight end at some point, probably not as a rookie, but definitely at some point. Jackson Powers-Johnson was one of my favorite prospects in this entire class. And to get him at 44, I said this countless times leading up to the draft, and I'll say it now. I'm not going to wave off this one. Look, there's going to be plenty of teams that selected in the top 43 that say to themselves in the year 2027, in that draft 3 years from now, why did we not take Jackson Powers-Johnson? He is going to be a beast, man. I like him a lot. Jackson Powers-Johnson and Brock Bowers was, I even tweeted this. That's culture-changing draft picks. I like JPJ a lot. Delmar Glaze was, hopefully he works out. 77 overall, a little rich for me. Again, hopefully he works out. That's the only one where I was like, okay, Raiders were going to ding you a little bit, but Trey Taylor, love it. And I also loved MJ Devonshire in the 7th round. I think he is just he's going to be a Raider. He's a Raider in the best sense, like just play style, attitude. Love that. Dylan Labe, love that from New Hampshire. He is infamous for having a 300-yard receiving game in college. And even Tommy Eichenberg. I really liked all around what the Raiders did, again, with the exception of the Delmar Glaze pick. But how much are you really going to ding a draft grade for a 3rd-round pick that you think is slightly overdrafted? Not much is the answer, and ultimately we gave this an A grade. Now, for the Chargers. Man. Guys, I love this class. I absolutely love this class. There was talk that they were going to take J.C. Latham, and I wouldn't have hated it because I trust what Jim Harbaugh is doing, and I generally trust what the long-term plan is. But when you take, to me, the best offensive tackle prospect since Penei Sewell, and, you now have 2 tackles in Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, this is not an exaggeration. As crazy as this may sound, because Justin Herbert is only 26, Justin Herbert may be playing with the 2 tackles in 2024 in Slater and Alt that he may play with for the remainder of his career. Now, there's of course going to be questions. Can Joe Alt make the transition to right tackle? To that, I say yes, 100%. Joe Alt, 2 years ago right now, I want to say 2.5 years ago, was a tight end. And in less than 2.5 years, he becomes an All-American left tackle top 5 pick. Do you really think that a guy can't switch his punches from being defensive on the left side to now he's being defensive on the right side? I know that, it's hard to do that on a week-to-week basis in the NFL, but Andrew Whitworth said that, it would generally, he said this in an interview before when asked the same question, could he switch from either side? He said, I could, but it would take an offseason just because of how the timing of the punches are, whether we're going, I'm going to go back so you guys can see me now, but, whether you're going back on the left side or, whether you're punching up with the right arm from the left tackle position now, on the right tackle, now you're punching with the left arm and now you're being defensive. Yes, Joe Alt can make that transition. I have zero worries there. Now, Ladd McConkey, I think you guys know what's coming here. Look, Ladd is, I love this. This is a description. Crafty, athletic, sneaky, by the way. They forgot that word. Sneaky athletic. He is, he's a lunch pail. He's going to be, first one in, last one out. Obviously, we can infer from that Ladd is, in fact, a white wide receiver. But Ladd is I know this is another good adjective here. He's a very good route runner. I love Ladd McConkey. He's a good separator. He is not the same player as Quentin Johnston is. And now you have 2 types of receivers. You have Quentin Johnston, who's going to be your big-bodied receiver. And I still think there's potential for Quentin Johnston to grow from year 1 to year 2. But look, we're talking at minimum here that the Chargers got 3 starters, because I cannot say enough how much I love Junior Colson to the Chargers. And when you walk out of a class with 3 starters, and I even like the day 3 late receivers in Brendan Rice and Cornelius Johnson, and even Kamani Vidal for that matter, even Cam Hart. This class all around is a tone-setting class, and I love this draft class so much. It is one of my favorites, and the Los Angeles Chargers get an A+ grade. The New York Jets are up, and again, another dream fit. I actually did a video specifically on NFL dream fits. I wanted Olu Fashanu to go to the Jets. I thought Olu in an offensive line room with Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses in year 1 to sit back and learn would be extremely beneficial for Olu. He's only 21 years old, or turned 22 late in his rookie year, and Tyron Smith has not played a full season since 2015. So the likelihood that Olu plays a lot of snaps in his rookie year is pretty high. And to be honest, I'd be surprised if Olu doesn't start at least 7 or 8 games for the Jets this year. Not only that, but his ceiling is, to me, as high as the sky. He was, of course, dinged for the Ohio State game, which I think is just, it's completely blown out of proportion. But aside from the Olu pick, which I loved for the Jets, Malachi Corley is a player the Jets do not have. Now, naturally, when you have a receiver that has a short average depth of target, and the description here from CBS makes a lot of sense, an angry receiver who plays like a running back, you're obviously going to get the Debo comp a lot. But, I mean, there's only one Debo. It's not exactly fair to compare everybody to Debo, but I will say this. You have Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams and nobody on your roster like Malachi Corley. Now, if you can take a load off Breece Hall whenever you can and say, hey, look, let's just give Malachi Corley a drag, let's give him a quick screen, anything to get the ball in his hands and save Breece Hall a touch, or even save Braylon Allen a touch, I love that for the Jets. Thought it was a great pick for them, especially with as unique of a skill set as Malachi has. And by the way, Jets fans, I have to mention this part. The text message that Robert Saleh sent Joe Douglas, they referenced the movie Draft Day, where he sent a picture of Malachi Corley on day 2 and said, no matter what. So I thought that was pretty cool. But now on to day 3, there's only like 2 picks from the Jets, or 1 pick really, that I just was not really a fan of. That's the Isaiah Davis selection. Not because of I didn't like the player, but why take Braylon Allen at 134 if you're going to essentially take the same player at 173? I mean, what's that say for Israel Abanikanda? I mean, somebody's getting cut, so it's like, you just spent a 5th round pick on a guy that's getting cut, or you spent a pick on Izzy last year that he's going to get cut. So, I mean, at least, and if they don't get cut, your 4th running back, how many carries is he really going to get? So, the Isaiah Davis one I wasn't really a big fan of. Hopefully Jordan Davis can be a solid backup. Hopefully Jordan Travis, excuse me. Hopefully Jordan Travis, and I say this like we said with Michael Pratt for the Packers. Jets fans, you know where I'm coming from. I hope this is a 5th round pick that at least in the 2024 season takes 0 snaps for the Jets. Obviously, we want Aaron Rodgers to stay healthy. That is the full intent behind that. I wish Jordan Travis the best, but I hope he plays 0 snaps this year because Aaron Rodgers plays all 17 games. That's the intent with that. Now, Braylon Allen, RB2 behind Breece Hall. I love the pick. I was a big Braylon Allen fan, and look, if you can have Braylon Allen take some big hits from the defense, and you can have him take some of the load off Breece's shoulders, I'm all for that. Overall, we gave the Jets an A- grade. Now, to New England. For their draft, obviously they killed it with Drake May on day 1, and I like Jalen Polk at pick 37. Jalen Polk, although he doesn't coach there anymore, he would be a receiver Bill Belichick loves because of his high effort in the run game as a run blocker. So I also like his ability as a receiver. He's not just a run blocking receiver. I mean, he's a great receiver. There's a reason he was taken at the top 40. Caden Wallace, I thought was a little rich. I thought it was actually really rich, and I think the same thing kind of applies to Layden Robinson, although not as rich as the Caden Wallace. I thought Caden Wallace was like a late 4th round pick. They took him in the early 3rd, but look, hopefully Caden works out. The Patriots need a lot of help along their offensive line, but one of my favorite picks on day 3, at least in terms of value, was by far Javon Baker. Javon Baker, perfect description right here. This is a future number 1 wideout. He is a great football player. And my concern with the Patriots whenever they drafted Drake was how are they going to actually build around him? Now, I like Polk and I like Baker. I'd be lying if I said that I think that's going to be the end-all be-all problem to, the what the Patriots have to do in terms of building around Drake May, but I think it's a good start, and I think Drake is an extremely, extremely talented football player. Even if he has to spend a little time behind Jacoby Brissett, I think they will get it right. We will address the Joe Milton pick. He's a 6th round pick for a reason. He's 6'5", 235, very athletic. I'd be surprised if there's not some sort of Taysom Hill role. I mean, you took Drake May number 3 overall for a reason. Obviously, Joe Milton's never going to start over Drake May unless Drake's hurt, which we obviously hope does not happen. But I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Joe Milton in some type of Taysom Hill role. Now, by the way, I was higher on Jaheim Bell than a lot of people. I like Jaheim Bell a lot. He is, to me, just he reminds me a lot of what the NFL wanted Irv Smith to be, to kind of be like that hybrid tight end role. And, he can play out, he can play in, he can, be a decent inline blocker. Although Jaheim Bell definitely needs some work in the run blocking game. I know he's a 7th round pick for a reason, but overall I like the Pats draft class, and I like that, instead of having Tyquan and Juju and Pop Douglas, that they actually address the receiver position. Overall, we gave the Patriots an A grade. Now to Miami. This class was interesting because there's parts of the class that I absolutely love. There's parts of the class that I'm not a big fan of. We'll address the fun parts first. Jalen Wright and Devon Achane in one backfield it's silly. It is silly. It is, hey, let's play in Madden and let's just, see what we can do to, score 75-yard touchdown plays. Whether it's Jalen, Achane, Tyreek Waddle, they're all burners, man. And even Malik Washington, he's not like, he's 194 and 5'8", so the initial thought is when somebody's that small that he's going to be like a 4-3 burner. Malik Washington is not that player, but I still like that pick. I love Mo Camara, one of my better value picks of the day. I love that for them. Even Taj Washington at 241. I like what Miami did. Chop Robinson is one that over time will get better. Now, I'm just going to be honest. I think in the first 6 weeks of his career, he's going to really, really struggle. But you don't draft a player at 21 to be, a 6-week player, and that's it. That's his entire career. I think Chop will work out in the long run. I think before Jalen and Bradley come back, I know they did sign Shaq Barrett this offseason, which, by the way, nobody really talks about at all. But I think Chop's going to struggle, especially, translating to the NFL. Now, of course, he's going to have Jalen and Bradley in his ear to help him get better and to help him, get better as a pass rusher. But I think there's going to be a bit of an adjustment period. I don't think he's going to be as big of a day one contributor as the Dolphins hope. Overall, though, I think they drafted really solid, and I gave them an A-. Now, to Buffalo, this is an interesting one. Because, they traded out of the first round. They even traded with the arch rival Chiefs to get Keon Coleman. I thought they overdrafted Bishop a little bit. I think Bishop will fare decent in coverage against tight ends, but a little overdrafted. But again, it goes back to the point of, in 3 years, if Bishop is a really good starter, who cares? Dwayne Carter, good defensive line depth. Like we said with interior offensive line depth, if you have defensive line depth, I'm never going to be like, that's a bad pick. Never. So I like that pick for them. By the way, if I didn't say, I like the Keon Coleman pick a lot. I think Keon is going to be a really good player for them. I don't agree with the C- grade from CBS at all. And if you are wondering why I'm on CBS, it's because I like the interface and I think it's very easy to just scroll up and down their website. Anyway, keep going here. Ray Davis, like the pick. He's a 24-year-old rookie. He's naturally going to be limited at the NFL, at least long term, 6-7 year career, because he's already 24. But look, if he can play behind James Cook and have solid roles take solid snaps in December and be that guy down the stretch of a game because he's a bigger back, I like it. Especially in the 4th round. Cedric Van Pran, like this pick a lot. He was a multi-year starter on a championship-winning football team. There's not a lot more to say than that. It's good depth in the 5th round. I thought Cedric was one of the bigger steals of the day. And the same thing also very much applies to Javon Solomon. I had Javon Solomon at 111 on my top 150, and they took him at 168. Overall, by the way, and I will also include, I like the Travis Clayton development pick. Hopefully he works out. I don't know much more about Travis Clayton other than he is an interesting development pick, and that Daniel Jeremiah raved about the potential of him. So take that for what it's worth. If DJ is going to, sign off on the potential, then I kind of am inclined to agree. It's a 7th round pick for a reason. I will say that, so don't hold out hope that Travis Clayton's going to be, a future multiple-time Pro Bowler, but hopefully it works out. But overall, I thought the Bills did solid for where they were, and you got to remember, this is going to be a bit of a transition year for them, and we went all in with Josh Allen for the past few years, and this is kind of the start of, what we're going to see moving forward for them. Ultimately, we gave the Bills an A- grade. I hope you enjoyed the NFL draft grades. If you did, please like and subscribe, as it helps tremendously. And yeah, I'm recording it, right after the draft. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave a 5-star rating, and I will see you next time. Love you guys.